Welcome to the Post-War podcast recorded at Karl-Marx Studios bunker somewhere hidden in Berlin. I'm Pablo De Negri, your host, and today's guest is German visual artist Ivonne Thein. Yvonne, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yvonne, we met a couple of months ago. Art Claims Impulse is the gallery. You showed this part of this work, Techno-Bodies, from which we are seeing something right now in the screens. And we will talk about this work later. But first, I wanted to know, where did it start for you, let's say, this search through art and body as an object, so to say?
Well, I think it started quite early. So I don't come really from art, so I didn't study art, but photography and video. And I think I was always interested in the body and as a subject, and that never changed. So I started to work with portraits in the beginning,
right.
But it became more abstract.
You studied film arts also, no?
Yeah, so it was a combination, film and photography. Okay. So I'm not really a professional filmmaker, so I'm coming more from the professional part of photography. And but at the end, it came up that I was more interested in art instead of becoming a professional photographer.
I understand. And I saw some of your works and installations with photography, older ones also working with the body as an object. And they have a lot of resemblance with your new works with AI. We will talk about that later. So that's why I was intrigued to know in which moment in your life you had this first notion of using technology, either mechanical or digital, to explore this object of study that is the body for your work.
Well, I think it started... I'm like this generation. I grew up with analog and digital at the same time, or like after each other. But I still know the analog time because I studied to work with film. And I think it was like the end of 2000s or like 2006. I started to work really with Photoshop as a part of my practice, but to kind of manipulate photography to show how this medium is changing. And the way I did that was over body images, because for the influence of these body images in the visual language of advertisement pictures and all this kind of social media now, it's really having a lot of, or like a deep impact to people. They kind of identify with these kind of images. So I started to request this kind of advertisement pictures. So this was like a shift in my practice, or like in my career, because before I was kind of taking these pictures as well, but at a certain point I more requested why we should trust these kind of images, or why we would take them as a role model for ourselves. So
but your studies in photography were art oriented.
I was really open in this study. Was really everything. I was also trained to do like commercial pictures, but I mostly studied in the artistic, so like free projects. Yeah. So I was more interested in that. But it was some process during my studying. I found out that I was really more interested in requesting images instead of producing them. So.
And where did you discover some experimental practices, or not so traditional practices, not so technical or not so industry oriented, so to say?
So I think it was just the result of my conceptual work with the body or in photography. I found out that I needed these digital tools to make these questions with my work. So this was kind of a shift also in the how I perceive the medium before and then after, because before I was using photography really in a classical way, and then after that I started really to play with it. It was almost like a painter would paint something, but I did it with Photoshop. So this was the...
Were you influenced by theory? Were you reading about this, or were you later on so interest in this as a conceptual philosophical matter?
Yeah, the main impulse was always like some certain concept I wanted to talk about with my images, but I was also reading about the medium, or like the role of the medium, or the change of, within the digital age, or how this gonna change, these technologies change our world, but especially in my case, this image world.
Yeah, I think for decades, everyone that studied media or something related, or communication, arts, and so we've been studying for decades. So this huge shift in representation and what has to do with the digital era, and this new realm of images, and the lack of an original, let's say, images, and so. Already from very rustic digital technologies compared from the ones today, right? And I'm interested to know how do you perceive this constant shift in representation that is related to new media, even though it's not new anymore, art and so for so many decades. How do you see that? You see this a continuum? You see that it's something that maybe is wrong interpreted, or how do you see this role of the new media as a tool for research, so to say, in which way representation is changing for society, so to say?
Well, I think it's like, on the one hand, you have the media is changing for society, but most of the people don't even recognize. They just can kind of consume or adapt really quickly. And I think maybe it's the role of art or artists or people working like more conscious with the medium, or like these technologies, to show how it's changing our daily life, or some social or political aspects, or ethical aspects. So I think is for me, this doing art is also like a tool to understand what is changing, or what does it make with me, but also with society, this kind of technology. So it's always like a kind of way to understand that. So I think it's I can imagine that for most of the people, they don't really recognize it so much. So like people just get their first smartphone, then they just start to use social media, or like they get involved, and it's really often really an unconscious process.
Right.
Probably.
And that certainly had to do with this shift, because of course I was born pre-internet era, pre-cell phone, cathodic tube TV, and so I'm still very much interested in all the video art movements that turn around analog video, and this Asian technology. But certainly there's a huge shift in the generations that were born with that as a given thing. And maybe in the academia this was problematized even before it started to have a real effect in visible society. But nowadays we can say all these, a lot of these elements from, talking about cyber or post-humanism, or incorporating technology as an everyday tool, and so we're already there in some aspect. And that is a huge shift in that regard. I don't know how you see that.
Yeah, I think, probably it's the most of the artists, they are maybe also close to other fields like philosophy and other theories, they already thematized that since 20 years.
They worry.
You know?
We worry more.
So, well, I think it's just part of being an artist mostly. Like, I wouldn't say in general, but if you work conceptual like I do, so you always read through different kind of fields about, to have some background of, or like you do some research. So I think you get along to books or texts about from media theorists. They writing already since the mid-90s about the post-digital age.
Exactly.
So this is why, of course, we speak now about that. Now it's a topic in the public or in the bigger, larger community. But this is like not.
And also, maybe it's not
thing.
even a topic anymore, because for the common person, it's just something that is incorporated to day-to-day life, and they don't even think of problematizing it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely there, and I wonder about the role of technology and digital technology specifically as some say co-creator or another actor of this creation process that had to do with it's only possible with new technology, so to say. And even though it's possible to tackle these subjects from identity, intimacy, what the body, the construction of the body as a as a construction. You also achieve in your artworks without using video, for example, in installations that only involved objects and materials. And did you think about incorporating also, so let's say, electronic mediums or as how do you think of it incorporating that? You thought it was something you needed to do to tackle these thematics?
You mean the co-creation with these technologies?
Did you think of it as a step forward? So for this questioning or investigation, let's say, as you say, you use art for also to realize what's there.
Yeah, I think it was like maybe a logical step in my practice to also start to use more these digital technologies, like beside editing photography or video material, also maybe use like image-based, but not really, in terms of a realistic image technologies like video or photography. So for me, on the one hand, it was interesting to go in the three-dimensional room to work with these installations and sculptures, and because I think I realized quite late, but I realized that my work was already sculptural in a way. So there was one thing which was maybe it's a development of last
kind of expansion, so to say.
Yes, because I think it's also always about virtual and real world or rooms. So I think it's if you want to speak about the real room, it's a three-dimensional room. We are like sitting here or like we are moving. So this is why it was logical in a way that it was something developing through the years of my
So
practice.
you started with photography, let's say, with static image.
Yes.
And then with moving image.
Yeah.
And then you went out of the screen, so to say. You expanded the...
I think I went into the three-dimensional room, yes. Like from the 2D to the 3D in a way of doing installations and sculptures. Yeah.
But it's very interesting when... some artworks still stand without the need for other technologies, for example, when it's just sculpture. I don't know if I wrote the name right, but there's this one, it's called I Feel Much Better Since I Stopped Eating Chocolate. I think it's just sculpture, or?
It's an installation, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's only, there's no technology. This is only but of course it questions...
And still says so much about the topics you are exploring, and so it's interesting when you achieve sculpture through your media practices, and then sculpture can also stand on its own. I know very little about sculpture, actually, but in recent years I've been having this intuitive affection for it, I think, and in some ways this materiality, this haptic factor, this texture factor. It can be a very special tool, so to say. And it's very interesting. Now we have in the background, in our screens, this transforming Techno-Bodies. And it's a series where a sculpture is also part of it. And this relationship between media and sculpture, actually, or image and sculpture, is one of the original myths of transmedia art or multimedia art. I don't know if it comes from a Greek story or what, but it's the daughter of how do you call a man that makes sculptures? I don't remember. And the last day, her boyfriend goes away. She makes her silhouette, his shadow silhouette in the wall, and then the next day, her father makes a sculpture out of it. And in this case, in Techno-Bodies, the silhouette is a moving silhouette that is made actually by artificial intelligence, and then you extract some morphology out of it into the three-dimensional world, and you expand into these sculptures with this latex, I don't know, material that...
silicon.
Silicon, right. Induces also a lot of triggers, I think, a lot of things in the recognition system for what's aspects of the body and so. How was this process for you, specifically with Techno-Bodies? I saw only the second one, I think, but I'm interested to know so how was the correlation?
So it's a bigger project. I in total I developed like 8 videos, and now it's 4 sculptures, and for me it was interesting how the technology or the artificial intelligence systems shape our idea about the body. So I did use an AI to train. It's an artificial intelligence. It's only made to create new images, and I trained it with images of bodies. In this case, it was stock photography, and the AI generated by itself by learning and relearning these body images, and in the videos you can see the process of the training, so how the AI is developing these images. Mostly you see only one image, maybe one result, and I was in this case I wanted to show the process of the training. In the same time I wanted to also transfer it back to the real room, because this is, I think, what we explore every day. Like we are doing a Zoom meeting, it's all digital, and it's all, or like we are using, or the AI technology is already used with face recognition and all these kind of things. It's really unconscious maybe. And but in the same time, we meet in the real world, in a physical space. So I wanted to show this kind of shift in between digital or virtual images and the real world. So this is why I also made these sculptures. It's really a classical process of sculpturing.
Yeah.
So like working with clay, and so it's no 3D printing or something like that. And at the end, you have like silicon sculptures which are inspired by the images the AI was generating. So and it's really more about how the visual language is changing through these kind of technologies in context of the body. So I think it's something is developing really fast right now. AI in general, these kind of systems, like they are, I think, the most growing. It will be the most growing industry in the future, and I think this is why it's too fast for us to get used to it and also to reflect the pros and cons of these technologies. So this is why I did that work.
Yeah, I think this happened before already. It was too fast, and we didn't have the time to choose if we wanted to go full digital with our society, for example, or not. We just did it, and suddenly we were there. I feel that with some of these new hyper-realist technologies and so, we are just entering something that maybe I'm just paranoid, but it seems like we are seeing just glimpses of something that could really change again or revolutionize our interaction with our identity, our relation with identity, our own body, to the others, politically, physically, etc. When we talk about deep fakes, for example, something that is almost exactly like the real thing, it triggers this kind of fear for the future, in the sense of that the machine could do a better representation of reality than reality itself. But your bodies are constantly changing, and they never stay in a real human form, let's say, by traditional definition. This is something you look for intentionally.
Well, this is the view the AI had, I like it that it was really, I found it really monstrous in a way that this technology has its own, it has the data set I gave, but it has its own idea about the body. So this is what I was like trying to find out. So what is the idea? But the reason why was also because I was kind of worried about these technologies and how it's going to, shape our future. And but interesting, I think, about this context is also that we always forget that we call it an artificial intelligence, but it has nothing to do with like the same way we think, like the cognitive way humans think is still a lot more complicated. And this is like technologies are really, in a way, one-dimensional, but because they usually can only do one thing really good.
And for us, it's like, whoa, it blows my mind,
Yeah, I think we kind of trying to humanize the technology.
Yeah.
Maybe because then it feels not so weird to use it.
Right.
Like, I think we still, in the European culture, still is really kind of has this distance to technologies. But, for example, in Japan, they don't have these problems because they also think that everything has a soul. Yeah. So they are like totally fine to have like humanoid robots to care their relatives.
Yeah.
I think here it wouldn't be possible because we still think this is like a technology and it's can't replace.
It's ideological, cultural, language thing, definitely.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting for me just to explore how, in a visual way, how we're gonna, how we are going to be seen by these technologies. But still, what we forget, it's always that the data and the algorithm, they all come from humans. So the technology is not able to exist by itself. So there has to be always someone to...
Yeah. But still they don't look as a human. It's so it's like... transforming images from flesh, one can say, and hair, and but we never finish to recognize something that will give us comfort as a human shape. And it's very interesting because it's as if you would ask the robot, okay, robot, I give you these human photos and you give me your definition for human morphology. And then the answer is this. And of course, for the robot, it means nothing, but for us, it totally makes us question a lot of things, because it hacks our brains in ways that we don't completely understand how they work. And suddenly we feel things, emotions, and so triggered by this unidimensional, as you said, system, that cannot think the way we can think.
Yeah. I think, of course, the reason why they look like that, it's because of the image material I gave the AI. If you just would give some images of faces, you would have a totally different result, because then you have a mix of faces. But in this case, you have, I gave really diverse body images, like also like old bodies or like colored bodies. So I think it's really depending on the data set or the material. So, but I think this is also because, if you see the face recognition, for example, there's some ethical problems because they are trained with images of white people.
Right.
So you have always this problem that we are like, if you look at the really diverse society, these technologies are maybe made by, white Western societies, and they all train these technologies just with their own image of bodies. And this is why there's problems.
Yeah, it's a symptom.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of something that already it's political by its construction, and through language. Let's say we're also part of it. We also have it very hard to think outside the culture, the language that we are part of. And we also feel strange with new unknown information, especially regarding human beings and the shape of the human beings, or what's acceptable to show, and that's also a moral aspect of ideology and language that we all reproduce, even though we think about it or not, right?
Yeah.
Should this be shown? Should this be seen? And this is also something very deep entangled in our perception and language with territories like the human body, political territories, or dispute for language. That's why so much happens, and we cannot even identify, I think, all the things that happen in the process.
Yeah.
And where do you see this project going in the sense of your research?
Well, I think it's going a bit more abstract right now. So I kind of finished this body of work, but I still do some sculptures. But I have lots of material of these images because I trained for several months. So I think I have the result is 500,000 images. So lots of images I could use to recreate. So what I did, or I started now to use the AI generated images and train them again with an AI, because
you can evolve develop the same training, the same original training.
Well, it's not the same training because the data set is different, so there's different images. But I was interested in how the AI works with its own creation of images. So how it's going to work with already AI-based images. So because before the images I used were like photographs, and this is like, of course, it's also made with the machine, but it's still kind of our realistic idea of a body. So in this case, the images get more abstract when you use already these distorted images you maybe generated before. Then you get even more abstract with the body. So I'm quite interested what kind of images you would need to still see a body in it. So how is our brain working?
What would you do when it suddenly starts seeing like a realistic body in
I think
this
it's not going to happen.
transformation?
Yeah, it would be interesting. Then maybe
For me, it's interesting that so far it didn't happen, that it stayed so much in the limit of representation, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still, able to kind of control what kind of images I want to generate it. And I've tried to force to get these kind of images. So on purpose, I didn't use the ones that look realistic.
Yeah.
Because this was not what I was searching for. So I was more searching for kind of a maybe, post-apocalyptic or maybe post-human idea of the body.
And what is because that's also another subject that for decades in media schools or we were reading very beautiful texts, philosophy texts about how this will change representation and so. And nowadays you can really say, wow, the less text about the subject and the fluid self or the fluid categories and stages of life. And now with the new technology, new representations, is really some picture you could put to this 40-year-old text, How do you see nowadays the subject of posthumanism, for example? What do you think it means, or this cyberhumanism? Do you think it changes meaning? Do you think it's the same as science fiction portrayed it a century ago, for example?
No, I mean, sometimes you have this, idea that this could be, you explore things now, and this could be also part of the Terminator trilogy, But maybe in terms of transhumanism, or like just combining technology with the body, and I think it's maybe what we wouldn't expect it, that it's happening like so fast. So what I think it's different to our idea about posthumanism.
It's very different. That's why I ask. It looks very different for what we were thinking about what posthumanism would look like.
Because, I mean, for us, a machine like 30 years ago was a real machine, Something was still like a machine. And now a machine could be like our cell phone. It's already a machine in terms of technology. And what we, I think this is maybe what's different is like the technology is not so visible as we were thinking 30 years ago.
Right.
When we thought about posthumanism, you always saw this people with like robot arms or transhumanism.
Right. Bionic man.
And I mean, this stuff is existing now, but I think it's like the technology is so invisible in our lives because it became so small, and you can use like chips in your arms or stuff like that. You don't need to see the technology anymore. So I think this is maybe different to the really old idea of posthumanism, that it's something more
old-fashioned.
Yeah, maybe it's more fluent. It's not so.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
or it's
exactly
melting more together than you would think 30 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant, that now finally you can see how we would look like, this shift in terms of the philosophy text we were reading 40 years ago, It's like you always had the doubt of these beautiful words, would even be translated in, because the world of images was still limited, let's say, to what you can do with technology. And as it expands, it also expands the black, let's say, a process, uncontrollable part that this intelligent brings to the table. We talked with Robert Seidel about it, who also works with artificial intelligence and so, and had a nice talk on this obscure part of the technologies that are producing the images of our world. And everyone choose how to stand, where to stand regarding to what's your relationship with this obscure part, or this part that the intelligent part, they call it, no? I asked before because you have a specific strategy, let's say. You don't leave it at what the machine creates, what you give it, but you also then intervene to expand that from a perspective that could be only possible, let's say, by you when you make the sculptures, for example, and so on.
For me, I think it's more like a co-creation. I don't see AI
You
as
like the term co-creation because some are against. That's the point.
Well, I see it like that because I think it's not a tool, it's not a software, it's something really more, and I give away some control about my art.
I like it also. Yeah.
So, and I think that's what makes it really interesting to work with for me. But maybe some artists they want to have the control. For them, it's really difficult. But for me, it was really interesting because I had to give up some control. So this is maybe similar to have a collaboration with another artist. So you have to kind of work together.
Right.
So this is what I did with AI. And I think this is what I like about the technology, that even you had some ideas or images in your mind when you started the project, you couldn't imagine to get these results.
Right.
So this is so playful in a way. As for me as an artist, it's something really refreshing.
Yeah.
Also, because of course it's always something like some good thing in the process of creating art is to have it really open what it's going to be at the end, what kind of work is going to develop. So I think this is, it's in my practice, it's really important to have this openness so that I don't go with these ideas, because I realized when I did that, it was really stuck quite often at a point where there was no possibility to change something to get a good result. And I think this openness is something I did make. Like I've tried to keep that in the last years. So this helps me a lot to have this kind of playful openness to what it's going to be at the end.
Yeah, I can think in music, for example, you can work a lot with non-musicians like me. We knew how to do electronic music, for example, just co-creating with these random algorithms regarding tone or modulation and so. And it's definitely a non-institutional approach, not professional approach, but it is a creational approach. And it's true that from my perspective, where I don't have a lot of preconcepts on how the technical or all the technical tools work, it's a very interesting to create this kind of game with this. It makes creational process fun and dynamic when you are surprised with what happens, and something stays a bit cold,
Yeah, I think for me, or like I guess for artists, it's always really important to play. This is
right.
Like creating is like really playing with stuff and. This, really, I wouldn't say easy, but, kind of, that's a good thing about art, that you don't have to give a certain result to someone, that no one is asking for something special, except if you make a commission, but in general, like, you're totally open about the results. So, and there doesn't it has to have any,
I find it very telling that with these new technologies of reproduction that we are still even not grasping as a whole, it's sometimes more calming to humanize them with your intervention, as failed human, and so they are so abstract. They have these particularities. For example, these moving images, transforming images. To talk about concepts or to talk about something that is not a fixed category or the fixed thing, but more something dynamic, more movable. And sometimes they are too abstract that it gets a bit too far, this gap, and it works a lot for to generate some kind of empathy with the work. I think, my opinion, that you expand this also with your intervention with the sculptures, and that you have to add, so to say, irregularities for humans to feel more close to the work in a way. Before with mechanic photography, the thing was that philosophic-wise or representation-wise, it was this machine that was a third perspective. It was not the perspective of a human eye, so it would add up this objectivity, this separation. And it feels like we are already too far, It feels like now the technologies we work now, we need to humanize them a bit to be able to work with them. I don't know what you feel.
I think this is, it's something like to make it less technological, we kind of call it intelligence. Or maybe it's just because the process or the algorithm behind, it's kind of close to what we think about how our brain is working. So I think this is why we call it intelligence. But what you said about the body and the physical space, that I create the sculptures, and this is why we feel a bit more close to a human body. So I think this is what I'm trying to challenge the viewer or the people seeing my work. It's really to have also kind of a uncomfortable feeling, maybe. In the same time, you have like a certain aesthetic maybe draws you. You want to touch it or you want to see it, but the way the bodies look like, they're not really fitting in our idea about body images. So this is why it makes you at the same time uncomfortable. So I like always this kind of thin border between attraction and discomfort in the same time. So I think it's easier when you have the physical sculpture to have this moment, because the surface of the screen in the videos is still some kind of a wall between me and these images of the body. You still have this screen which causes a certain distance to the images I see.
Yeah, it's true. In some way, it feels like one feels less guilt in identifying with the physical object. I don't know why. In the case of your exhibition, it's a bit so that then you have this familiarity as a physical being, and then you can, I think, understand better the concept of the work. Because these things sometimes are... they say too much, too conceptually and too abstract for us to comprehend and not to run away from it, They say the first time they showed the Lumière, the first film from history, the Lumière's film from the train. I don't remember who said that the people didn't run away because they think a train was coming. They ran away because they couldn't grasp the level of... representation, the level of realism in the representation, and this made the people so scared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason I work with the sculptures, I did that for other works also before. I think it's also because for me, this is like not just one direction. We don't move from the realistic world to the virtual world. I think we're going in both directions the same time all the time. We kind of step in between these two worlds, or we live in these two worlds at the same time.
Right.
So this is also why I wanted to have these physical objects, because this is how we transmit our body all the time.
Right? Yeah. territories, frontiers, so concrete for human experience to talk about the body, creation of the body, creation itself, and so it's motherhood. We talk here with Laura von Prosper. She makes video art, and she also used motherhood as a subject, literally in her works, but not necessarily at first. And we had an interesting talk, for example, on how she changed the logic on how she was applying the textures to her videos after regarding perspective and perception with life, with creation, and so in relation to her the experience of being mother, so to say. I wanted to know, since your research is on body identity, and to which extent you include that, consciously include that, or relate, make a relation to your own experience and what you are exploring, let's say, artistically.
Yeah, I did some work which also was connecting to this kind of topic, but I think for me what really changed is the perspective from the only me perspective to, it's extended to someone else now.
This photo work, no?
No, one was a video work,
okay.
and the one is an installation. But it's, I think both works were also about how society is, seeing motherhood in terms of the body, but also just also in terms of how the expectations of being a mother and an artist,
right?
This kind of
there's
social problem. I think
economic, political thing there.
So I don't know. I mean, for me, the motherhood thing is something. It's natural. You just make the decision, yes or no, you know, and then it's something you don't maybe do that consciously, that something is changing. Maybe for me it changed more that I was more, I take more risk in my work. So I was more, I wasn't so strict about what can I do as an artist. So what are people expecting from me with my art in terms of career, what they already, what you already produced. So I think this made me a bit more, taking more risk.
The last years, or 4 years, I could say, you were gaining a lot of grants and doing a lot of exhibitions, and you were very, very active.
Yeah.
Did that have to do with your this new perspective you acquire?
Yeah, maybe, but also maybe with the fact that I changed my practice. Also because before I was more or less only doing photography and video, and I started, with becoming a mother, to take this risk to say, okay, this is what maybe I think that people expect me to be, the video photography artist, but I can do whatever I like in my practice.
Right.
So I think to say, okay, this is really about me and what I want to explore in my work, and it's not about the others. It was something. It came in the same period of being also a mother.
Because intimacy as a topic, it was part of your work. Already.
Yeah, so I think it's one other part of my work. So the one really big part is technology and body, and the other part is maybe the social political expectations about the body, or like in the public image world. And I think just changing this kind of, I think it's easier maybe because I also was more sure about that I wanted to be an artist, because this is something maybe you struggle in the beginning, because it's not easy, of course, to make your living from art. So this is something you maybe request. Some people are maybe not. They know from after studying that they want to be an artist.
Yeah.
And for me, it was always because I didn't study art, that it was coming a bit later.
Not at first.
That
later,
I was really sure about that. I always did it, but I wasn't never sure if I see myself as an artist.
Yeah.
So I think this changed a bit with my practice, but also with motherhood.
Right.
And I think this also helped to get some grants and, all these kind of fundings because, I think it's easier to get the funding when you do this kind of installative works. And, At the same time, I'm also questioning some really actual
Hot topics.
actual topic,
Yeah.
because now we are speaking a lot about technology. And
I don't know if it's easy, but certainly you need to have a concrete, let's say, field of study and research orientation and particular, let's say, combination of factors, technique or process of your own. And you have all these things, and you definitely didn't feel like because you were a mother you didn't need to investigate anymore about the construction of the human body through art. You still had the need to do that, let's say.
Of course, yeah. I think this is like, of course, being an artist is a profession, but it's also an inner need I have to do, And of course, in the time you're like maybe a mother in the beginning, you have less time to work on your art because, But and at the same time, you realize you really need to do it, and that you miss to do it, and that you need the kind of you have to find a way to create.
I understand.
Yeah, so this was I think this was really a result of having some months I couldn't really be in the studio, or I didn't have the studio at this time because I rented my studio, and I really felt unhappy to be not in the studio and creating. Yeah. So I think this is also a point to realize that some art somehow has to be part of your life. So like being an artist. So yeah,
this is always also a transforming, complicated thing, relationship between artist life, profession, artist life as a profession, private life, and so. And so here comes the question. Being a mother and so, but also working so much on this, let's say, dystopic vision of the future that now in a lot of aspects are already becoming real, even though we can work about them and talk poetically and understand them from philosophical ways, there's also a concrete transformation that is happening, let's say, with the climate. There's a way in which this technocratic world, society is affecting our day-to-day life in a very concrete manner. As a person, let's say, how do you envision the future, the near future, our relationship with technology in relation to a very potential for doing something very good, in sense of changing for good and solving a lot of things. And there's also always this nightmare, let's say, we were having since we are writing science fiction. What do you position in this question?
So I think, in general, for me, this technological development is something positive. So I see it positive, especially if you speak about climate change and all that stuff. I think it's something really helps to, for example, do an artist talk in USA, but being in Berlin at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Candice Brights once said, when there was the pandemic and suddenly everything happened virtually with Zoom, she said, like, I don't really know why I traveled around the world the last 5 or 10 years to give artist talks. It's just not nice for yourself, but it's also really bad for the climate and everything. And the same maybe is with the art fairs. You know, you had you ship around the world. And really, it takes so much energy and money and effort to ship around the world artworks. But you could also explore them with VR or like in the virtual space, just to see the world, to work. So this is, I think, it's really interesting that someone from New York can go to an exhibition in Berlin.
Yeah.
With VR glasses and just walk through the rooms. So I think in this case, I see it, there's like many positive aspects of technology and it's helping. But in the same time, there has to be maybe more open or forward discussion about ethics and technology. So I think what didn't happen yet is that we have to think about this social, political, and ethical aspects of technologies. So I think this is what became, it's a bit slow because the technology development was so fast or so quick that all these ethical aspects were not really part of the process yet. So I think this is maybe the one part, it's a bit critically, that still behind all these technologies, there's human beings. And they decide what kind of images we see, how technology is gonna be used, and I think this is what people quite often forget about it, that it's not the technology itself.
Yeah.
It's still the human being. So I think this is maybe the challenging part of it. But still, I think it's. I'm not like worried that it's that the humans is gonna not. We are not gonna exist anymore because of technologies.
Okay.
So I think it's. We are still have the need to meet each other in the real world. I think this is what the corona pandemic was good about, because we realized that like the physical contact is really important to us too. So I think
we are mammals.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we are like humans, so we need the physical contact. So I think it's something won't happen that we end up in like a kind of, some inside and we just explore the world through the technology. So I think it's always parallel. It's going to be parallel.
When you envision the world your daughter is going to live at your age, you envision these ethical problems with technology and the planet solved in a healthy way, so to say. Do you see this as a possibility?
I hope so. I mean, I think I'm more like an optimistic person in general. So I think like it's not going to. I think the challenge is that people understand that it's not happening without doing something, like that we are all part of this change. I think this is like something my generation is really a bit too relaxed about. So the future generation, like younger generations, are really worried about climate change, which is, I think, a good thing, because we are just trying to push it away. So I see that in my environment, that many people don't think so much about that.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing about all these kind of young people now. They go to demonstrate about the climate change, because I think this is the biggest challenge we're facing. So and that's really important, to be active, not passive, just saying it's okay, we have to do something, but we don't do something. So I think this is maybe the challenge, for sure, for my generation. Maybe for the youngers, it's more normal that this is a topic. For my daughter, maybe it's
I
normal
definitely
then.
hope so, yeah. There's no other way, I think. Thank you, Ivonne, for coming here. We will leave links to your projects. You have some current exhibitions, and you have some other exhibitions next year, and so we will leave the links for that in the description of the video. And thank you for coming, and everyone, thank you for listening and watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to give us a like and a comment under the video. If you want to see more, click here and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.